Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV, and we welcome you from all around the world to this wonderful show where we talk about global affairs, innovation, and what we can do to make the world a better place. I hope you can hear me. I'm on my way to a very exciting meeting, but I wanted the opportunity to let you know about an event that I attended last night of celebrating the 50th year of ping pong diplomacy. This was when the table tennis teams of the United States and China exchanged players for the first time in history, and the United States players set foot in China for the first time since 1949. This historic visit actually triggered the U.S. relationship with China and opened up relationships under the Nixon administration. Yesterday, I had the honor of meeting Connie Swearing and her husband, who played on the USA team, along with the minister from the Embassy of China, who I'm actually meeting this morning for a briefing meeting. I think it's exciting how sports, in this case, brought two countries together. And perhaps we could talk about this when I return to the show on Wednesday, as I'm on travel briefly for a few meetings. I want to go ahead and open up the show and hand it over to Mark Lee. Mark, please bring on the rest guests. I hope you heard me. If not, I'll play this again.
No, definitely heard you, and definitely had the pleasure of interviewing somebody that had done some of that diplomacy not that long ago. Is a gentleman that actually was talking about how he has shaped his mindset and shaped some of the things that he's done in the world because of the power of ping pong and some of the power of that diplomacy that you're talking about. And that was a show that was a couple of weeks ago and all along those lines. So it's always good to have these conversations.
I've got the minister waiting for me. I'm running 5 minutes late. I got to head over, but I will be back on Wednesday. Tomorrow is the swearing in of the new sheriff of Wake County, and busy time here from City Hall. You can see here, that's City Hall right there, the Christmas tree. So welcome to the show, everybody around the world. We'll be talking about ping pong diplomacy on Wednesday, and about a little bit, I'm researching the history of it, but it was a game-changing event. It all happened when a guy named Glenn Cohen mistakenly got on the Chinese bus and met the Chinese players, and they got off the bus, and it was the first time since 1949 that U.S. and Chinese athletes were together, and it opened up a whole door of relationships. And so maybe this is a time we need to start looking at around the world. It's just building these relationships. Mark, thank you so much. Have a great show. Let the light and love of our hearts always lift out of the darkness. This is Steve Rouse signing off from my phone from City Hall, and I'll brief you on the ministers' meeting on Wednesday.
Sounds great. And I'll bring in some of the rest of the guests as well, have some actual things that I wanted to bring up in the news and just in life in general that I have found quite interesting. And all along those lines, of course, we've got Dan Worthington with me. I've got the founder of the network, or one of the founders, Nick Palveda, and Lee Newton Rhodes. And of course, we do know that sports diplomacy is very important. And we've seen some of that even during the World Cup and around a number of other spaces. I know that I'm still rooting for Brazil. The United States is out. There's actually going to be a battle of the colonial powers when England plays France, since both of those won and advanced. And there are two other teams, I think Argentina, and if I got who the fourth team is that has won, Brazil is actually playing today. And there are some other teams that are playing today as well. And then by the end of, I think, Tuesday, we'll be down to teams as we battle and get ready to find the champion of the World Cup. Having their pride in their nature, pride in whatever, as they actually do the whole thing around soccer, because soccer is definitely a world sport and all of that. But speaking of world events, I've actually got some world events that I want to talk about, some that are very serious, but some that are very enlightening. I was actually having a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine, and this is going to be an interesting news show, and I can't wait to see what people think about this, because, the fine folks at NASA, Nick, are sometimes bored and they don't know what to do with themselves and everything. But, there's a thing that goes on in the world on a regular basis. Many of us, as we were growing up, used to use this thing that I'm going to mention as part of our understanding of ourselves and who we are and what we are all about and everything. So I don't know what everybody is in terms of their belief systems, in terms of what they believe in terms of personality traits and everything. But, a lot of people around the world have always been fans of this thing called astrology. I am actually been for all my years a Cancer. I've been a Cancer, as far as I know, for all of my life and all of that. But apparently NASA got really bored not that long ago, and they decided that there are is a 13th constellation. Therefore, there is a 13th sign, and they realigned it. So 86% of the world is no longer what they thought they were. So I have recently learned that I am not the Cancer that I thought I was, and definitely that it has been shifted and all of that. And apparently other people are not what they thought they used to be. So Nick, I don't know what sign you are or what sign you have been followed in the astrology, because the astrology books are still saying that it's the 12 signs. But NASA has decided that there is a 13th sign, and they have created a 13th sign, and they've even jilted some people out of their sign, because my brother, historically, so I'm still going to call him a Scorpio, is a Scorpio, but I've learned that Scorpios are actually around Thanksgiving week, and it only goes for a week. So apparently he's not a Scorpio, he's now a Libra. So what is folks' thoughts?
Sorry, Mark.
What side are you,
Mark,
and what side did you think you were?
Are you seriously asking two Mormons to comment on pagan astrology? Is that really what you're doing?
No, I'm just asking.
I'd love to hear Dad's response.
I'm waiting to hear Nick's answer.
Remember, I'm also an attorney, so the first thing I think to doing, Mark, is to sue NASA. Okay, because I'm an Aquarius. If they change my status, I believe it's defamation, because Aquariuses are the best, and I will file a $100 million lawsuit against NASA for redesignating me improperly. So that's my answer to that question. I don't know what
Dan and Lee, what are your thoughts? What side have you been thinking you were all along this time, and what are you going to do now that apparently it's been changed? One sign only gets a week. They used to get a whole month. Now they're only getting a week and everything. So Lee, what is your thoughts? What's going on? Are you going to be dealing with this, and how are you handling this?
Technically, I'm a Gemini, but on a scale of 1 to 10, it doesn't rate. This is not what I spend my time during the day thinking about.
I do.
Fair enough answer. Dan, are you going to worry about this?
What's that, Nick?
Yeah, no,
I'm visibly upset with this whole thing. I didn't even know it was happening to me, and I'm going to file a $100 million lawsuit against NASA this afternoon.
Pass the Kleenex.
TV ratings, I know. But hey, listen, I think I've been a Leo. I don't follow astrology. I don't put any cotton to astrology. I imagine that some people do put their faith in astrology. I happen to put my faith in God and Jesus Christ. And so, whether you can follow astrology as kind of a fun thing and your fortune cookies and all that, and the year of the pig and whatever else happens to be going on, the year of the monkey.
The year of the pig. Thank you very much. The year of the pig's a good year.
How about the year of the rat?
Yeah,
You're
Rooster, whatever happens
my
to be
lawsuit,
snake,
please.
I really don't care, Mark. I don't care. I imagine many people around the world do care, because that's what they do, and I'm okay with that. I mean, it's all right. Imagine the stars. The stars were set in motion and created by God Almighty. I imagine there's a relationship between the planets and the rotations and the gravitational fields and how the stars are laid out, because all things are intelligence before the Lord. And so, whatever you guys want to do with that, fine.
Shaquille, he says he doesn't care, and we'll get to some other issues around the world as well, but he says he doesn't care. But there are apparently, because like I said, NASA was bored and they didn't have anything else to do, but apparently they have totally shifted the personalities and the population of 86% of the world. And we all know that that is a popular line. It was a popular line back in the 50s and the 60s, probably a popular line in the 2000s.
Mark,
even now, people ask themselves, what's your sign and everything. So what's your thoughts about this?
I have to say that
go ahead, Dan.
Uranus is not a constellation.
So I want Nick back here. Nick, get back here. Turn your camera back on. So,
Dan, it's a good thing today is not show and tell.
So far, Mark, based on what I've heard, I think horoscopes
it's a
are
planet.
fun, but so far from what I've heard, Nick is the same as every single girl that I have ever dated or had a crush on, or ever since I was in kindergarten. And most of whom I'm still friends with. I've had one relationship that was terrible, and that was a Cancer. So that probably explains why you and I don't get along too well. Lee's a Gemini. I get along very well with them. I'm a 13 Cancer Sagittarius. Not that I'm following this or anything. And
Yeah.
Dan is a Leo, the same as my mother. So I think that explains it all. I'm not going to be dating Nick, although we do get along pretty well. But what I will say is, apparently that they've created a whole new star sign just for
You
me.
don't swing that way.
That sits between. Well, I don't know. I haven't spent enough time in California. Maybe I'll change. But no, they've got a new star sign just for me between Scorpio and Sagittarius, which I just make the cut for. So
this makes a lot of sense. So you are the member of that new star sign. So this makes a lot of sense. You've been trying to, like, have your leadership role in this whole network and everything. So that would make sense. There's a new sign, and therefore that's what you're doing and everything.
Well,
and apparently
I haven't
that
been
new sign is also about healing. So you're trying to heal the network.
I haven't been trying
You don't know where the new sign is. You don't know if that's true, Mark.
You're
You're making this crap up.
Yes,
but
it's a teamwork.
I will say, I think when I've been reading, horoscope things over the years, there is, it does seem to match my personality and who I am pretty well. I think that, the more Christian side of my belief system would say something similar to Dan. Probably that makes sense. There's probably some guidance there. And God probably talks to everybody in a way that they'll understand. This might be a way for God to talk to people who aren't going to pick up a Bible. Maybe they'll pick up some tarot cards. But I think you can have some fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. I've never had, other than up to very recently with my lawyers and things like that are all cancers. I've had pretty bad experiences with cancers, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to turn around and say, "Oh, you're a cancer. I can't talk to you. We can't be friends, or have a relationship." I think the people that do that are just taking these things too seriously, right? Judge people for who they are, and go from there.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I was having fun with that and everything.
Both lawyers are a cancer.
Yeah.
Well, apparently that's what I just found out, is that the sides have shifted. So apparently I've been thinking I was a Cancer and my parents were Geminis, and now I found out that I'm actually the Gemini and my parents are Tauruses. So it's very confusing if you want to see this new shift and everything along those lines. But folks have lived entireties of their lives thinking they were one thing, and then they wake up and find out that they're something else, and all in the.
I will say,
I've got a question. Then who are the Uraneuses?
They're called Democrats, Dan. Oh no, don't stop it.
Yeah,
I got that. I got that. I understand.
There is that. There's no sign that
actually for Democrats, for liberals, or Uranus.
Yeah, but speaking of liberals and Democrats, we'll get off this for a second. But there is a country, and I know we've oftentimes talked about the United States and what goes on in the United States. But another serious topic, but still somewhat related and everything. What are folks' thoughts about the fact that
your favorite person, Elon Musk, who's released this treasure trove of documents from Twitter, and has actually released documents that show clearly the DNC putting people on an enemy list. So if I'm not on the enemy list yet, I must be getting close.
I think you're high up on the enemy list.
You have to try. You have to try harder.
Hold on a second.
The other day, you're the most.
Hold on a second. You've been enemy list for a while, because don't forget that Hoover and a bunch of others had enemy lists around the civil rights struggle, around the unions, around a number of other things, and that's actually where I was going, because apparently Iran, which also has enemy lists, has said that they're going to disband their morality police amid months of protests. So Iran has said that even the hijab law is under review, and state media dismisses claims that the morality police have been abolished. So is the morality police been abolished?
But I'll just
I'm sorry, Mark, real quick. Shaquille, you brought up something.
The US again, I'll have to enter through Republican ports like Texas and Florida, and not enter through where I normally enter, California or New York, right?
Because the United States, we're still doing the vaccine mandate for foreigners, but that's a side issue. You brought up something about Twitter and Musk on Friday. How come the major news is not covering that story? You would think everybody would be covering it.
Well, exactly, and I actually heard about
they
it
were
because I was listening to an interview with James Wood, who
exactly, Dan,
fantastic actor, and he had to do a phone interview with Tucker Carlson on Fox, and that was the first I'd heard of it. I thought this is ridiculous, but I'm going to pivot just slightly back to Mark, because like to to pick on these cancers.
His eyes got bigger.
So you like to talk about the Black Panthers and all those sorts of things, and it's a
What do you have
well-established
against the Pink Panther?
now. It's a well-established fact now that the FBI and various police departments put so-called undercover agents into these movements, especially during the Vietnam time, in order to make them more angry, in order to get them to do things and incite riots and things like that.
Bomb
And it's
places.
something that even today
Shaquille, it's called good governance.
people have complained about, and you've complained about. You've referred to certain people that have been in jail for murders where the evidence is tenuous and that sort of thing. So I just have to ask you the question, why is it unreasonable then, if you believe that the FBI and the police department did these things in the 60s, why is it unreasonable for people today to say, did the FBI or other law enforcement agencies and other government agents have some involvement in the January 6th
Shaquille?
riot? Are they
Shaquille?
involved
No kidding.
in
No.
other
Shaquille, why are you going back so
other
far?
causes that you're talking about? Are they involved? I'd like to know your answer to that, Mark. Please.
No,
Oh, wait,
and
Mark,
I
Mark,
said
before you go,
Then
Mark, before you go,
questions
Go, Lee,
about
go,
it.
Lee.
one second, you don't have to go back so far, Shaquille. The Wisconsin with with Governor Whitner kidnapping. The FBI was part of that, and which is why
Yes,
everybody
yes,
was let off.
No, but Lee,
Well,
I mean,
first
she's
off,
white, so she doesn't
no,
matter.
hold
I'm
on a second.
talking about things that matter to us,
Shaquille
right?
and Lee, first off, I have said
Fair
before, and I
enough.
will say it again, I've said it on several shows. Yes, government has been involved in a number of attempts to disrupt political forces, be they on the right or the left. They have done it historically. And yes, I do still believe that they continue to do it. I am not 100% convinced that there was not
Called,
some
deep
government involvement in one way or another in things from as far back as COVID to even the 9/11 attack and all in that space. But like I said, I don't have any proof. I wasn't there. I might have some friends in certain government agencies.
Whoa,
but
whoa! You say the government was involved in 9/11? That's what you think? Are you spreading misinformation?
I'm not spreading any
Dangerous
I'm not spreading
that
any
will imperil
misinformation.
the
I'm just saying
democracy and the
that I have
future of
questions.
America?
I said I have questions, and you know what those questions are and how they are answered. Only time will
you're
tell.
not-
It's kind of like
but
Watergate and some of the other
apparently-
things
but
that through
Mark,
the
you're
course of
playing-
history
you're playing
you can find
directly
out what
into my-
happens, and you know whether
Mark,
there was
you're
compliance.
playing
I mean,
directly into
was
my
the
hand,
government
though.
involved with Noriega? Was the government involved with the drug trade? Was the government involved in a number of other things that people are concerned that the
But
government
Mark,
may have a role in?
you're playing
Was the
directly
government
into my-
involved in Vietnam in the drug trade through Vietnam through dead bodies? That's a known fact.
Yes.
Mark, you're playing directly into my hand. I
Butcher,
know all of
yeah.
that. That's my point. And when you say you've got questions, what I'm asking you back is, why is it so unreasonable and why is it so, such an imminent threat to democracy? The republic is going to collapse when people ask questions about January 6th, when people ask questions about the 2020 election results, when people ask questions about the Arizona results. Why is it that when people other than the progressive part of the Democrats ask questions, it's somehow some threat? Why do you support that? I don't get it.
First off, nobody said that I did not think that they didn't have a valid reason. I just didn't like the way that they did it, and even in some of the protests that I've been part of,
But
you
you
try
have
to
no
get people, you try to get people not to
criticism
disrupt or to
Black
take it
Panthers
to the
did.
extreme
Mark,
and everything.
Mark,
That's just part
You've
of
got
my
no
argument
criticism
and
of how the
everything.
Black Panthers did things. In fact, you stand
I've
up for
said
them all the
I'm
time and
supportive
try
of
to tell
Black
me-
Panthers,
try
but
to
you
tell
know
me
the Black Panthers also.
were the ones that introduced and came up with the idea of breakfasts and lunches at schools. You want to stand up for Black Panthers. Why is it not okay for the other side of politics that you don't agree with to do things that are similar? Lee,
I didn't say it was.
Yeah, we just got through two years of being told we're not allowed to ask questions. All through school, I was told there's no such thing as a stupid question. All of a sudden, come COVID, you're not allowed to ask questions. Whether it's from a lab, whether 6 feet makes sense, whether masks work, whether anything. We were not allowed to ask questions. You got censored for that.
But Lee, isn't that across the board? Because I mean, that's part of the
Oh.
problem is that you're not allowed to ask
Oh,
questions,
across
and
the
part
board.
of also the rise in social media. Because I think a lot of people, this
No
is just my
stupid
thought, and this
questions.
isn't the media show,
It
but
could be,
I think a lot
but
of
you
people
should be
got
entitled to
tired
ask
of
stupid
not
questions.
being able to ask the questions that they want to ask. So, and some of the questions, if you hear them, I've been on Clubhouse rooms, I've been in Facebook spaces, I've been in Twitter spaces, and some of the questions that are asked, you do sometimes wonder, where's that question coming from? But like I said, I think that the questions are allowed to be asked, and one of the power powers of what is going on is that not everybody is dependent solely on whatever the newspaper sources are, whether that's the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Fort Worth, whatever the paper is in Fort Worth, Texas, and everything. But they are saying that, look, I've got questions. I've got things that I want to know. What's the best thing I'm going to do? I'm going to go to the people.
The media that asks real questions of government. If I just loosely remember the list that you gave, the New York Times, Washington Post.
Akil, if you would follow my conversation, I was saying that most people are not listening to them, and therefore they are going to their own sources. This is why I brought up Clubhouse and Facebook and the other things, because a lot of people are going to I've seen entire newsrooms where people will look at those news sources, including on both sides of the aisle, left and right, Republican and Democrat, and then they will debate, which is what Lee's talking about, what they are hearing, and maybe even bring in some personal insight. Because if you're in those rooms and you are a nurse or you are a doctor or something, you can be like, look, the New York Times said such and such, or the Reuters said such and such, Fox said such and such, and I was in the hospital room and that's not what I saw. So therefore, there is some real discussions going on where people are actually saying what they are not just seeing, but what they are observing, and therefore it becomes some real dialogue. And I'm just using Clubhouse as one example, but there are several other spaces that are out there that exist that I'm seeing some real community engagement and some real dialogue among folks, including people that don't necessarily agree. I've had some, just like I've had robust debates here, I've had robust debates on those with folks that I don't necessarily agree with.
Let me tell you what I say. When almost 70% plus of people that live in the United States say that they don't trust US media, when 65% of the world's population says that they don't trust specifically US media, and about 60% say they don't trust their own, what you're looking at is not community engagement. That is really the definition of community disengagement. That is a community going, media, you know what? You're full of shit. I'm going to get more truth out of reading my star sign readings for the week that tells you what my lucky numbers are, and I go and play the lotto with those lucky numbers, right? Like that's what people are doing. By the way, here's the real question I've got for you about the star sign changes from NASA and my new star sign they've created for me. I read about that about a year ago, but here's my question. Do these new, because as I understand it, it's about the time that you were born, right? Mm-hmm. So is this the new star sign system for the people that, are whatever the next generation now is called, the ones that are just being born at the moment? Is this the star sign system for them, and the rest of us are grandfathered into the old star sign system?
I asked that same question. I have not gotten an answer. I asked that same question. I have not got the answer, because that's what I would think would be that it would be like a grandfathering in clause, but I don't know whether that makes sense, but it's a way that NASA did it.
How much off the hardworking Americans' taxpayer dollars do you think NASA and other government agencies are going to spend to find out the answer to that question? Let's say, I don't know, let's start with 100 million. Dan, 100 million? More or less? What do you reckon? How much of priority will this be? How much of the hardworking tax dollars, hardworking American tax dollars are going to be spent on this? It's got to be a big figure. 100, 200 million, Dan?
Tequila?
Stab in the dark?
Can we re-identify with whatever we want?
Serious. They're not serious.
You can identify with whatever constellations you want.
Or anything else.
Hold on. Wait a minute. So we can identify with whatever we want. Isn't that part of the argument that the LGBTQIA community has been given for decades, that they can identify any way that they want to, and it's really none of our business how they choose to identify?
Being facetious.
Well,
Mark, you can't change.
I really identify with Capricorn.
You and Steve Rao said to me on Friday that I'm not white, right? That I should lose some of the talking points that I have. So, look, I wouldn't mind having some of this white privilege that everyone tells me white people in America have. It sounds fantastic. I'd sign me up for it. So can I just go to America and identify as a rich white Christian and male, and walk in and get one of these moderate positions, walk into the country clubs that Nick likes to talk about down in Florida? Can I just do that?
Dan's already said he's going to welcome you into society. So Dan's already said that he has no perfect problem with doing this, welcoming you into his personal society. As a matter of fact, I think he even invited me into it. But I do want to back up on something, because you said something, you said it before, and I know we brought it up, and I was not trying to go because I was going to also go to one of our other favorite topics, climate and everything, and one of the places that is fighting the war, because apparently they have a climate issue as well. But I'll get to that in a second. Are we saying that there is not a that the good old boy network does not exist, and the good old boy network does not impact mostly those that are in the European American society, which is, as my understanding, is the basic definition of white privilege, because the European Americans have been in charge of corporations and in charge of everything else, and they've basically created the good old boy network, which of course is going to hire those that are like them into positions like them and bringing them up and everything. So are we saying that nobody here on the panel believes that? So you think that there is not a semblance of truth, and what that truth may be or not be, and y'all have had a lot more dealings than I have in corporate America, and I will admit that and everything, but you're saying that you don't think that the good old boy network, or what some people would call white privilege, is a real thing, or that I'm just asking. I'm trying to understand.
Let me answer the question for you. So
It is a real thing. What's your point?
There's a difference between.
Thank you, Nick.
Well,
That's a real thing.
There's a difference between, Mark, a good old boys network which can act exclusionary towards females, and a good old boys network which can act exclusionary to people of color. In my personal experience,
which one do you identify with?
Well, I might be a white female. They seem to have it pretty good, but I will tell you, I would say to you, Mark, that in my personal experience, the good old boys network is more exclusionary to females than it is to people of color. But the reason for that, I don't think is deliberate. I think it's the culture of how men act when they're around each other, and to get to the very top of a lot of the industries that I've been involved in, like finance, there's a certain level of pure aggression, and there's a certain level of risk-taking. Now, if you don't have the balls to be in finance and live on the edge like I do, you might be like Nick and go into law. But if you've really got balls of steel and you're going to take risks and you're going to sit there and tear your hair out, and you've got dealers that have got billions of dollars on the line every time they're doing trades, and you've got to watch what they're doing, and you've got to try and take a counter position on one of the banks and that sort of stuff. When you're doing that, it takes a certain kind of person. Not every male wants to do it, and a lot of males that do it only do it for a handful of years. You know, Goldman Sachs people, let me finish. Goldman Sachs people come in there at 25, they're probably gone by the time they're 30. So what I'm saying to you is, if you think there's a good old boys network purely because it's designed to keep out women, I think you're wrong. I think it's that women generally don't want to be doing those sorts of roles. They're not interested in that kind of aggressive, hardcore stuff. And the ones that are normally get the admiration of the guys. They're not excluded, right? And if you think that American boards, if we're going to talk specifically about the United States, are exclusionary to people of color, you're going to have to explain to me why Indians of Indian ethnicity, like myself, but the ones that have actually come straight from India, why they are disproportionately represented on the boards of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States. Why would white people be so racist and they'll exclude black, but they won't exclude Indians?
Hold on a second. A couple of things. First off, that comes down to an acceptance level, which is also part of the board, because yes, sometimes if you are seen as coming from another country or another part of the world, then yes, you get a little bit of that quote unquote exotic taste and everything along those lines. So I do think that they are more accepted than some others that are in those positions.
So what you're saying is the white supremacists that have softened, and now they're okay with the mud people, but as long as they're not black. Is that basically what you're saying?
Well, I was going to ask you another question to go in along with what we're talking about, because if you look, and I think some folks that have been here that are more in the legal field will understand what I'm saying. If you look at the history, there have been some major African-American institutions that some of them even created out of insurance and out of other things that do not get the same kind of breaks, and that are actually not treated the same way because of some biases that exist. And even in the year 20 2022, about to be 2023, they still exist and everything. So you cannot tell me that there are not some fiscal problems that are race-based that are still very real in the way that loans are handed out, in the way that a number of other things are handed out. And when some of those businesses are created that support the African-American community, they are not received well, and they don't get the kind of support from the government and other agencies that they should get. And therefore they are either
Is he frozen?
Jack got his tongue.
It's frozen on my side.
Nick, are we now censoring people live?
No,
He knew what he was going to say and
no,
stopped.
I think he got frozen. The computer took over. It doesn't really matter because computers can take over everything. So will technology. So at the end of the day, humans are going to be relegated. Computers are taking over your business, Shaquille. They're doing trading.
Well, absolutely. And in my opinion, they do a terrible job. But I can't. But I can't say that because Ken Griffiths is a billionaire, and Citadel is a fantastic company. But I will say that just my observation in life, just in general, right, is that you look at things in the world and you work out where you might have an advantage and where you might have a disadvantage. Now, I did look very seriously at going into computerized high-frequency trading.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I wanted to do, and I looked at algorithmic trading and thought, look, this is going to be the future. However, because of how mature the companies that were already in that space were, I very fast realized that this would be a dangerous road and a difficult road. And it's been really the same thing when I've gone into becoming a bigger fund manager. It's a big difference between when I'm managing, 10 million of my own money and my friends' money to managing 100 million of other people's money to managing $1 billion of other people's money. Because you have certain issues that you can't take some positions because they're not big enough. And it's too hard to get your positions in. It's too hard to get your positions out of the market. You've got liquidity issues, right. All of those sorts of things, right? There are advantages and disadvantages that you have. Now, when you're smaller, it means you're more nimble, you're more quick, you can take on opportunities that may otherwise be too difficult or not worth doing if you're a bigger portfolio manager. But when you're a bigger portfolio manager, you get access to things like better rates from the banks, and better prime broking rates that you can negotiate, right? Those things are fantastic. This is really the same thing with life. When I go to the Middle East, because I have what they consider to be an Islamic name, they know, they can tell what my family history is. I have significant advantages in the Middle East than what a white person would have if they went to the Middle East, okay? But the thing that I find is I don't have a disadvantage that I can see, or if I do, it's minimal when I'm in white countries, whether that be across Europe, Mark, or whether that be in the United States. The disadvantage that's being described to me is just not there as far as I can tell. Now, maybe I'm so oblivious to it that it's happening without me, but the thing is, if you've got to point out to me where I've been treated in a racist way, maybe it's not that big a deal to me. And if somebody doesn't like me because of the color of my skin, I don't like that idea. But what I'm going to do is just not hang out with that person. And what I have done throughout my life is go, I don't like the way a certain thing is. I'm going to go and set up my own. I'm going to go and buy my own pub at 22 years of age because I don't like the way that the pubs in that area are being run. And I was very successful.
We tried that.
Mark,
we tried that and it got shattered.
You can't
That's
blame.
what Black Wall Street is. Black Wall
Mark,
Street was
you
totally.
can't, no, but what you are trying to do is to rectify your perceived wrongs or even real wrongs of the past by saying we now are going to exclude whites or we're going to be racist against whites. I'm not going for that.
Yeah,
and if it works for you, fine. But I'm not going for it.
We're trying to exclude
I feel very privileged that when I go to countries around the world, if I go to the Pacific Island countries, they know that my family comes from Fiji, so I get treated like I'm a local, even though I'm not one. Right? When I go through Europe, they treat me like, okay, cool, he's British, yeah, fine, no problems. And they will ask me where my accent comes from, where I'm from, and that sort of stuff out of fascination. And they're so proud. Oh, that's awesome. Hey, can I show you our buildings? Can I take you for a tour of our city? That's how I get treated when I'm in very, very white parts of Europe. And when I'm in the United States, people are fantastic to me. So, when I go to the Middle East, I have advantages because of my family religions. Now, those advantages, white people wouldn't have those. White people may have, if what you're saying is correct, that they have some advantages in the United States. It's not worldwide. And as I said, in the United States, I think you'll find that where that occurs, it's few and far between. It is not the main experience of most people in the United States. It's certainly not the experience of people in California, where the Democrats have been in control. I mean, you've had people in most states in the United States that have voted the same way for the last 40 years.
Well, blind voting, that's a whole nother. Blind voting, that's a whole nother.
Sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, there's a viral clip going around for a long time now between Don Lemon asking Morgan Freeman about race and how it plays into America, what have you. And Morgan Freeman just looks at him like, "What are you kidding? You and me, we're sitting here talking to each other. What you're joking, aren't you? This is America, whatever."
I love that clip because that's precisely the thing. He says, if you want to cure racism, stop talking about it. And two, if you tell me you can't get out of the place, well, the bus leaves every day. And I think that's a really powerful thing, Mark, because
the bus leaves every day. But if you got economic issues that can't get you on the bus, then what's the purpose of the bus leaving? Yeah, you can tell people. You can tell people in Compton all day long that the bus leaves and that they can leave Compton. But if they can't afford the bus or don't have the resources to even make the change, then what's the purpose of telling them the bus leaves every day? Because I mean,
Mark, every day. Mark, every day.
But if I can't get on the bus or the plane,
Mark, every day they wake up, they're making a choice. And that choice is significant. They can either do something or not. They can play victim or not. Every day.
But sometimes those choices are not as easy to just switch as y'all are trying to make it seem like and everything. Because if you live in a welfare neighborhood, sometimes you are doing that thing called survival. And if you're in that survival mode, you're just trying to survive. You're not trying to think about how to get to freaking resort town or whatever, because you're actually trying to just in that survival mode. And you can't tell me, and that's across the board. Y'all talk about and I think Dan said that he's been recently found out that he falls in that category. It's the same thing with people that are in the quote unquote trailer parks and are considered put in that category of poor white trash and everything. That's like saying the same thing that they can just, up.
I never thought about it when it was
not overnight, Mark. But he just say all it is excuses.
What an absolute load of rubbish. Dan says that he grew up in a trailer park. He had a teenage mother. Okay. Dan became the dean of a university. He's had an illustrious career in law, and how he got there was he took his studies seriously, and he's worked very, very hard, and he's gotten there. For my family, we come from poverty that you wouldn't. My family grew up. My parents grew up in poverty that when they tell me about it, I'm so proud of where they actually came from, but it also breaks my heart. Some of the things that they tell me is really, really hard to listen to, okay? My grandmother doesn't have much longer to go, and I know that she's 86 on the same day as my birthday next week, but she's unlikely to see her 87th. I think she's probably only got a few months. When I look at her, had she grown up in a more affluent society with better healthcare options and etc., she may well have lived a bit longer, but she's not. Okay, she's very, very frail. But I look at what she came from in Fiji, where they lived in a little tin house, where the wind was coming through and they were burning wood in the middle of this one room to keep themselves warm and all that sort of stuff. Okay, my uncle studied so hard and he managed to get himself a scholarship to Australia because he was the top student in Fiji. He was the Dux of the entire country of Fiji and came in under the Pacific Island, program, whatever it was that they had. My mother, after her father died just before I was born, she inherited, the family inherited some money, and they gave my mother enough money for an airfare to Australia, and she landed in Australia with $600. And she got a job working in the most menial positions, right? Cleaning bathrooms and just trying to survive. But she was able to raise a child, me, mostly on her own. She managed to put me through a private school because she studied hard enough to become a nurse. She's managed to acquire some assets and when she retires, which I'm hoping she'll do soon, but she's a workaholic, but I do hope she'll retire soon. She has some investment properties and she has a comfortable life. For people to tell me that you go to a Western country, a country with enormous wealth, enormous resources, enormous freedom, whether that be the United States or whether it be other Western countries like Australia and New Zealand or Canada or the UK or anywhere in Europe, anywhere in Western Europe, and tell me that they are so hard done by because of what's happened to them in the past, what's happened to their great-great-great-grandparents, that they can't make it, I think that is such an incredible cop-out, okay? If I fail in life from where I am right now, it's not because of the color of my skin. It's because I made some bad decisions. And I have made a few in the last few years, which has been very costly too, and I've made some that have been very profitable. It was up to me. What I wouldn't do is to blame society for whatever failures I've got. And this playing the victim all the time and saying, look, here I am living in a country that gives me social security benefits, that gives me subsidized housing to some degree, that gives me subsidized healthcare to some degree, etc. But I
free education, Shaquille. Free education.
Free education, subsidized stuff.
Don't even go to me on the education side, because education, that's part of the reason that the HBCUs were set up.
You want to try and tell me that the overwhelming majority, not like a small little fraction, but the overwhelming majority of people of certain ethnicities are so hard done by that they cannot, for generations and generations, get ahead in the United States. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. I don't believe it. And if you think that I am some really successful person, right? I consider myself to be reasonably successful. I wish I had more. I don't, but I wish I had more. But I'm pretty comfortable. But I live a life that my great-great-grandparents wouldn't even be able to imagine. They'd never be able to imagine what the compared to what they had luxury that I live in.
But
Nor
Shaquille, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I don't think it's
would African Americans, if they look at how their great-great-grandparents lived after they were supposedly freed from slavery, okay, the luxury afforded to them compared to where they come from is just miles apart. So I'm not saying that there is not still issues, Mark. I'm not saying that there are not still issues, but to use that as a crutch and an excuse for every problem that holds people back is bullshit. You need to get over it and then live your life as best you can.
Well, like I said, that's what I'm doing. And Shaquille, there's a lot of things that you said that I don't necessarily agree with you or Lee and everything along those lines, because I have also seen some. If you hold on a second, I'm going to tell you, just like you had your long soliloquy, I'll get my long soliloquy as well and everything. So there are a couple of things that are going on that and I want to understand, because maybe I'm wrong, and I'll admit if I'm wrong and everything, but there are some advantages that are going on in society that are disadvantaged, because you just brought up education. And yes, there are still in the 21st century places that don't have the same resources that are in minority communities that they do in other societies. That's part of the reason of the still need, in my mind. Maybe y'all don't think that we need HBCUs. But part of the reason for having HBCUs is because, historically speaking, they could not get the kind of careers and the kind of opportunities that were available in other societies and in other universities, like the what is considered PWI.
Mark, just give 1 second. Mark, you're making a good point. Life's not fair. Get over it. Sorry. Life wasn't fair to me, and I can list you a lot of reasons why. And therefore what? I shouldn't get up out of bed in the morning? Life's not fair because someone's Jewish, someone's Catholic, someone's Mormon.
And most of the folks that I know get up every day and they just struggle and they get into the things that they're trying to do.
You think LeBron James is not going to try?
So I'm not knocking that. The Horatio Alger story is a beautiful story for everybody, whether that's a actual Horatio Alger or whether that's somebody like the guy that Pursuit of Happiness was all about and everything. So I'm not dismissing that. I'm not dismissing that at all.
Let me address your statement. You talk about HBCUs, right? Now, I get it. HBCUs. I get what you're saying. I do. I get it. However, I am not persuaded personally that having people that look like you is the determining factor of success later in life, right? I don't believe it. And the reason I don't believe it is because I don't think the facts support it. You have a community. It's a community that is unquestionably deserving of an incredible amount of respect because of what happened during slavery. And the last known time of it happened in the United States. So unquestionably, you have a community. Hey, let me finish, please. That you have a community that is deserving of respect and does need a little bit of a leg up, or has needed a bit of a leg up to be able to, fully achieve their potential. But the idea that you can only achieve success if other people from your community are your leaders and your inspiration is belied by the fact that immigrants from all over the world came to the United States and other Western countries and were oftentimes the only ones there. Italians, if you go back to the aftermath of World War II.
Shaquille, hold on. That comes back to something. Hold on a second, Shaquille. I can't let that slide. I can't let that slide. That comes back to something that we've been talking about for a while. Shaquille, hold on. I cannot let that slide. Hold on.
Let me finish. Let me finish. Italians, just to use one example, they came over to Australia, the US, etc. They were marginalised. They were excluded from society, and some of that society was the Irish, white Irish Americans that didn't get on with them. But the white Irish Americans were excluded previously by the group that was already there. None of these groups required only themselves to teach their kids in order for them to get ahead. And other minorities like Fijian Indians, for example, have been very successful when they've gone overseas, despite the fact that it would be a mathematical impossibility for them to have enough people to have a society or have a university solely made up of them or predominantly made up of them. It doesn't happen. But they've been able to find success. So I'm still waiting for some reason why you think that you guys are so behind that you need all of these things, and after having them for decades, you still are complaining about the same stuff that you're complaining about.
No, but Shaquille, first off, there's a misconception in what you're saying, because one, and it still goes on. I would argue it still goes on today and everything. A lot of times when those groups of other ethnicities and other cultures have come in, they have definitely insulated themselves and have definitely insulated themselves in a way that they are able to create those empires among themselves and then expand out and everything. Hold on a second. But when African Americans have done it, whether it was the Black Wall Street in Durham, whether it was the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, whether it was certain neighborhoods in Harlem, then it gets gentrified or it gets pretty much destroyed in one form or fashion or another. So we're the only group that isn't encouraged to do what you say everybody other groups should be encouraged to do.
No, you can point to other groups.
And, I would, like I said, Dan, you actually informed me because I did not know, and like I said, I learned things on the network just like I hope other people do as well. I was not as aware of the Mormon Trail of Tears. I know of the Native American Trail of Tears until Friday when you brought that up and everything. So I will take that in point, and I will definitely study that and everything. But I was not as aware of that as and I'm not saying that there aren't other groups and everything. But when people have tried to do it, look at Florida. Look at Florida. There was a whole group of Black Hebrewites, and they are pretty much ostracized. I don't necessarily believe in their viewpoints and some of their thought patterns and everything, but still they are ostracized and down in that community and aren't looked at all that greatly in some of the other communities that they're in and everything. Look at what happened with the Muslims. A lot of the Muslims, American Muslims, were trying to do what you say you folks should do, which is build up in your neighborhood and everything. And that is looked down on by many people in the community. But if you go read A Final Call, or you go read some of the other teachings of Louis Farrakhan or Elijah Muhammad or a number of others, that's what they say. They say build up within the community and build what you were saying the Italians and the Irish did and everything. But then when you do that and you say that, you're called a reverse racist and everything, because that's part of the argument. There are other arguments. I'm not saying that he's the greatest guy in the world. There are other arguments around Mr. Farrakhan, who was also a great musician apparently. But part of the argument has been building up the community. But when you build it up, then you're told that that's wrong.
That's just nonsense, Mark.
You know, Mark, just 1 second.
You want to compare it to some immigrant communities, right? But you like to keep glossing over, no matter how many times I keep bringing it up, you like to gloss over the fact that the United States is attractive, as are every other Five Eyes nation, but we're talking about America for the moment, the America is attractive to people from all over the world. Okay, I've got a lot of French Polynesian friends that have moved to the United States and Canada. They don't have enough people there to form their own community and to insulate themselves. Okay, there's lots of groups that don't do what you're suggesting, who somehow manage to be relatively successful, whose children and grandchildren have substantially better lives than they've ever had. You know, and for me personally, I'm an example of that. My mother has worked as a nurse her whole life. She can't believe the kind of lifestyle that I've got, right? Heaven knows what my children are like. They'll probably be spoiled brats like Nick, right? But that's a good thing, because at least my family was able to achieve that within a couple of generations. I hope Nick's still backstage listening to that.
I'm still backstage. I have a story too.
Let me just finish having a crack at Mark. So I think that when you play this victim card, if there is
it's not a victim card. A victim card implies that you don't think that there's anything great going on, and that
I've never said
that there's not great things happening in the United States.
I have always acknowledged that there are bad things.
But the victim card, see, a victim to me is somebody that sits down and doesn't respond to what's going on. That's why I've used the analogy of you got a house that's messed up, then you try to clean up the house. That's why I've used that analogy several times, which is what that is not being a victim. That is being somebody that is actually trying to make changes within society and trying to make society better. That's not being a victim. To me, a victim is the one that sits there and lays down and just sits there and gets fucked.
Mark, give me a
break.
My
language.
Give me a break. That's all right. We're already going live around the world. Give me a break here when you try to say we're trying to make the world better. How exactly? By saying to somebody like me, well, if you were American, Shaquille, you would have to support the Democrats because the Democrats speak.
Nobody said you had to support the Democrats. I've got Republican friends. My mom dated a Republican. So I'm not thinking you have to support one party or another.
I'm not some
so like I said, so saying those statements is not true. Like I said, if I choose to vote, and so far, most of the candidates that I've backed have been Democrats. But if a Republican comes around, I told you before, I loved what Courtney Giles was about.
Yeah, and actually,
whether I voted for her or not, that's irrelevant. But I definitely loved her views. There have been other candidates that I love. You say you want to bring Mark Meadows. There are some things about Mark Meadows and some of his views around certain things around LGBTQI rights and even around religion that I may not agree with. But I'm willing to listen to him. And if he can convince me, then who knows? Maybe I vote for Mark Meadows and everything. But I'm just saying that I am at least willing to listen to what folks got to say. That's what I do with all the candidates and everything.
I've never said anything about Meadows, but
not Meadows. I meant the lieutenant governor. I said the wrong name.
Oh, Mark Robinson. That's who you're talking about. But listen, I'll get Mark Robinson on the phone backstage. I'll get Mark Robinson on the phone, and we can have a chat to him if you like. It's no problem.
All politicians look alike.
But no, I have contact at the American Renewal Project. But Mark, you say that you vote the other side, but then you allow some president or presidential candidate to say, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Who the hell?
Like I said, I had a problem with him saying that, and I said that on this show before. Because I don't think that nobody has a right. Nobody has a right to try to dictate who a leader is.
Over these issues.
No, but nobody has a right to dictate who the leaders are. I mean, that's part of the problem with the African American community. And I've said that before. I would tell you this before. I've said before that people trying to dictate who the leader is. I can respect whoever I want, but I'm not trying to have somebody of any government or any political force try to tell me who the leaders are and all of that.
Let's just go back to the shows that we had during that week. You basically either justified it or stayed silent. It's the same thing. We allow so many issues to get hijacked, right? I personally, because I study economics and finance, I believe in a broad-based tax system. That makes sense. Okay, having an extremely progressive rate of taxation, it just doesn't work. Okay, we're not having a broad-based tax system is a really bad idea when it comes to economics. I'm not going to change my mind about that unless an economist with some really potent ideas can persuade me off that. Okay, I don't think that's going to be. I've studied finance economics for my whole career. I don't think so. So somebody who promotes that. Let me finish for a second. Somebody who promotes that is not going to be somebody that I'm going to think is going to be a very good fiscal manager of the country's resources. Now, on the same token, we got climate change. It's a real issue. It really is. Okay, if not climate change in and of itself, if you don't think that the planet's getting warmer and that's the issue, certainly almost everybody would agree that we are causing environmental damage, and that's causing damage to to the animals and other species that share this planet with us, and it's causing long-term damage to the planet. And we should try to do something about that if we can. Okay? Why exactly have we allowed that issue to be hijacked and then to all of a sudden try to say, well, like the Sierra Club has, well, climate change is in part caused because of racism in America, because of healthcare disparities, or because of lack of abortion access.
Hold on a second. You say this, but hold on.
That doesn't stand up to even the tiniest
Hold on a
amount of
second. But hold on a second. You say the
stand
Sierra
out. So
Club.
why doesn't Black Lives
Hold
Matter?
on. Hold on.
Why doesn't all these black groups and groups that claim to represent people of color say, hey, listen, we care about the environment too, but don't try to combine these two things. These are two completely separate.
Well, first off, hold on a second. Hold on a second. First off, a couple of things. One, and I'm just going to bring up my point. You can respond back to them. The Sierra Club is not the only one that has hijacked political discussions and everything.
The
Sierra Club may be on the left. Hold on. The Sierra Club may be on the left. I would argue, and I think I would have a very good argument, that the NRA has hijacked it on the right. And I'm not saying that I'm against guns or anything along those lines, but I do think that they have hijacked some discussions. Some of the law and order organizations have hijacked it on the right as well. And you also said something. Hold on a second. You also said something earlier as well. And hold on. You also said something earlier that I want to respond to. You asked why they don't. Hold on, Shaquille. Hold on, Shaquille. I want to address something else that you brought up as well. Hold on, because you said you wanted to bring up something, and I brought it up. You said, why don't we do it? I've done it in discussions with various friends of mine and everything as well, because one of the arguments I've heard is actually what you just said. And when it happens that people bring it up, then people get mad, because I know for a fact that there have been people that have looked at the gains of the African American community, and then they've seen like women's groups and LGBTQI groups and other groups use that same argument to get their rights and to get whatever they want to go. And then they're like, wait a minute, hold on, wait a minute, what's going on here? Yes, I like that y'all are using the argument to make changes, but then y'all are leapfrogging us and are making the changes that y'all want in your communities, whatever those communities are. I just named two when I said women's and LGBTQI rights and everything. And then the ones that made the initial claim are going like, hold on, we're still in the same boat. And y'all have actually made an advancement on our necks and everything, but you haven't given us any acknowledgement, one, that that's what you did, and two, even reach back and try to help the cause. So that is also a conversation that goes on. That's like the conversation that has existed for decades between the feminists and the Black Power movement, because some people would say that the feminists actually made some of their changes on the backs of the Black Power movement, and have never reached back and actually had that conversation within the groups. And there's other groups that the same argument can be made.
I've got to respond here. First of all, I asked you to clarify, are you suggesting the NRA are taking advantage of the black community in order to further their cause? That sounds absurd, but if that's not what you're saying.
That's not what I was saying. I'm just saying that we were talking about power structures, and we're talking about how the Sierra Club has hijacked. According to you, the Sierra Club and others have hijacked the left. I'm just saying that the NRA to some degree has hijacked the right.
We've got 2 minutes left. It was a yes/no question. If what you are suggesting is that other groups have gone off the backs of the movements or the improvement in life that the black community has wanted in order to get what they wanted and then left them behind, that may in part be true. I don't disagree with you. That may in part be true. However, the biggest group of people that try to say, look, we have a heart, we care so much about people, are white women. Okay. But what's happened is this has morphed into this intersectional bullshit. Okay. Where you've got white feminists with, who want to shave their heads and no other part of their body and have, big tuffles of arm hair, coming out saying, free the bra, burn the bra, standing up for Muslim extremists who want to kill their daughters for having relationships. It doesn't make any sense, but they're stuck in this position where any group who's a minority should be supported. Okay. And the problem is that women's perspectives were fairly simple to understand. It was, we want to have the right to vote, we want to be able to enter the workforce, and we want to be able to be paid, which they're still asking for. We want to be paid the same and have similar opportunities and not be sexually harassed. Okay, that's what they've asked for. But the black community has been a lot more wishy-washy than that. It's, well, we want this, we want society to be fairer, and then it's morphed into, we want to make sure that people don't have microaggressions against us. What sort of
First
crap
off,
is
the
that?
microaggression argument
Yeah,
is more
but
of a
don't
women's
forget-
argument, so
but
you're
even
actually
if you
convoluting the
believe-
conversations because
Even if
microaggressions
you
is
believe
usually
that
geared more
microaggression,
toward the
even
women's
if you
media in
believe
my
that
mind and everything.
microaggressions is a real thing, right? You pick your battles.
Well,
And when you start to
microaggression is a real
nitpick
thing.
every tiny little thing, people just go, look, I've tried, I've had enough, I give up, goodbye. And on that, we're
Yep.
at the hour. Last words to you, Mark.
Well, the last thing I was going to say is that this has been a robust conversation. I was actually going to get it up to the climate change issue really quickly, and I was
I did
hoping
try.
Sasha was going to be here and all in those lines, but we can bring it up tomorrow because apparently while the Russians are fighting the Ukrainian battle and everything, they've got a climate change issue because apparently 2,500 dead seals were found on the Caspian Sea coast, and I'm sure that folks will be blaming that on climate change and other things. So maybe they have two issues. They've got to fight the Ukrainians on one side and the seals on the other. So we started off with astrology, and that's where I was going to go. I was going to
Mark, are those Navy SEAls?
seal conversation and all in
Russian
that
seals.
space and everything. What did you say, Lee, as we get ready to wrap everything up?
Are those Navy SEAls?
No, I don't think that they're Navy SEAls. Maybe they're Marine SEAls. Or maybe they're one of
2,500
the
off
other
the
SEAls, but I knew where
top
you were
is
going with that. But,
You got faith in the US forces, Lee.
Yeah.
Unless it was the LGBT Navy SEAL squad.
Could have been.
could have been that squad and everything. We're going to find out. But yeah, those seals are bothering them on one side while the Ukrainians are bothering them on the other. But we're going to find out what happens. And we're going to get on out of here because I know that Economics Monday is taking place right about now. And then at 12, we've got the media show where apparently we're going to discuss the media and its plans in 2023. I'm thinking that's going to be the Pod TV media, but it could just be media in general. But whatever it is, it's going to be a discussion around 2023. And as a new friend of mine says, and we've got a new slogan, 2023, that shit ain't free. So get that t-shirt, get it soon, get it in all in those lines, because that's going to be the new motto for 2023. And on that note, we're going to get on out of here.